All right, folks, welcome back to Chapter 10, or 13, Part 2. Now, last time we talked a lot of the data, and I showed you a lot of the data for climate change, and I'll show you a little bit more of that today, but I want to, or in this chapter, but I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the possible consequences of climate change, right? First of all, it should be noted that this is an extremely complex process, right? And, you know, using this predictive modeling, this scientific modeling to predict specific, regional changes is pretty challenging, right? And that is because, the magnitude of temperature increase is not uniform everywhere. Like I said, the poles are being, incredibly affected by, especially our North Pole, affected by climate change, right? And precipitation changes will also vary across the globe, right? And then, possibly shutdown of currents, right? Those deep water currents can cause, possible cooling in some regions while temperatures rise in the other. Remember, shutting off of this, those deep water circulation currents were linked to one of the largest mass extinctions that's ever hit our planet. Some other possible consequences of climate change: global warming, already experiencing that. Sea level rise, already experiencing that. Changing Arctic, definitely experiencing that. Ocean acidity, and yes, that is happening as well, right? And then some possible others, right? Permafrost thawing is already happening. Glaciers melting, right, is happening. There's lots of fires around. Pests are expanding, right? Diseases increasing. Now, our current COVID thing, I don't think has anything to do with global warming. It just has to do more with, our global economy that we have now, right? Species decline, storm intensity increasing, sea levels rise, right? Flooding increase, right? I think we're starting to see a lot of these trends, right? Some other possible consequences, right? Certainly, there will be higher maximum and higher minimum temperatures around the planet, right? And very likely, we'll see increase of frequency of heavy precipitation in some areas, and increase in droughts in others, and then, globally, probably increase in these cyclonic storms, like cyclones, typhoons, hurricanes, all the same thing, just different names. Right? Sea level rise, right? Already, so here's a little bit more data. Sea level has risen 25 centimeters since 1870, and that doesn't sound like a lot. It depends, what coastline you're on, though, too, right? So, looking at, our California coastline, the active tectonic shore coastline, right? Shoreline shift is not going to be much, and shoreline retreat's not going to be much because you rise steeply out of the water out into the coastal mountains, right? But looking at our Atlantic seaboard, our passive margin, which has been building up this wide, broad continental shelf, right? This, pardon me, same rise in sea level is going to cause a fairly dramatic shift in shoreline, and in fact, a change of 1 foot in sea level, and we've already lost about half a foot, is about 1,800 feet of shoreline loss. So we've already lost about 1,000 feet of shoreline on our Atlantic coast due to the sea level rise. And the sea level rise is not only driven by melting glaciers, but also thermal expansion, simply the fact that warm water occupies more volume than cold water. Right? And then, of course, the impact is going to be greatest on these shallow, very gentle sloped coastlines, right? Pardon me. Here's a little graph showing year-to-year changes in sea volume ice, right? Here's the 1979 to 2000 median average. 2012 sea ice volume was down to this, right? So basically since 79, we've lost more than 13% of our Arctic sea ice, right? And we're also starting to see a lot of thawing permafrost, as was mentioned in our Arctic report card, right? And thawing permafrost is a positive feedback mechanism because organic material that is frozen and stored in this permafrost, right? Once it thaws out, it's going to be, susceptible to bacterial action, and as a byproduct of that, it's going to release CO2 and methane in large quantities. Increasing ocean acidity as well, that is happening. So carbon dioxide, the more carbon dioxide in the air, the more dissolves in the seawater, and the seawater becomes a weak acid called carbonic acid, and it can lead to things known as like coral bleaching, right? So here's a nice healthy coral reef. Here's one that has been bleached out due to too much acidity in the water. So again, the oceans become acidic, right? And it's harder for these marine organisms that create their shells out of calcite, which is eaten by acid, right? To grow their hard parts, and makes it harder for them to live, right? Some other effects: famine, disease, species invading new areas, right? But then something I want to talk to you about, now I mentioned in the last video, the big deal is, right, through most of our history, it's the temperature that is forcing the CO2, right? The CO2 kind of lags behind by several hundred years of the temperature, and that's due mainly to chemical weathering, releasing lots of CO2. But now, under our current circumstances for the last 100 years or so, it is the CO2 that is forcing the temperature, and that's a dramatic and important change. So I want to tell you about another time in our planet's history where the CO2 is actually forcing the temperature, or the carbon was forcing the temperature as well, right? And this is known as the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. It happened about 55.5 million years ago, and it lasted around 200,000 years. And what are we talking? What is this PETM? It's a spike, as you can see right here, right? This little spike, right, is the PETM. It's an increase in global temperatures by 5 to 8 degrees centigrade, probably in several spikes lasting 2 to 20,000 years or so. And what we think the most likely culprit was release of tons of methane hydrates, right? The Paleocene-Eocene maximum was then followed by the early Eocene climatic optimum, which is the warmest time of the Cenozoic, the last, 600 or 65 million years, right? This is lasted till about 52.6 million years, which makes it about 2.3 million year long effect. And what we saw here was another mass extinction, a mass extinction of benthic foraminifera. These are ones that little single-cell organisms that make their shells out of calcite. They live on the seafloor. We see a mass extinction of that. And on land, we see a faunal turnover. What is a faunal turnover? It is just shy of a mass extinction, essentially. So what we see is a big turnover on land, big turnover in the oceans as far as fauna, right? So almost a mass extinction. And it's important to look at our Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum because, again, it's the best analog we have to our current rapid rise in temperatures, and it's also one of the few times in Earth's history when it was the carbon that's been forcing the temperature rather than the temperature forcing the carbon. The most likely release or cause of this, again, like I said, was the release of 1,500 gigatons of carbon in the form of methane hydrates, methane being, a natural gas, is CH4, 1 carbon, 4 hydrogen, stored in the oceans and in permafrost as these hydrates, or methane popsicles, essentially, right? And this is kind of sequestering them, right? But, the release of these caused a force of the temperature, right? And basically what we think happened is there was slowly the deep sea temperatures surpassed a threshold, a point of no return, if you will, that caused this rapid dissolution of hydrates in several steps, right? This rapid dissolution of hydrates forced the temperature warmer, which forced more hydrates to be released, which forced the temperature higher, which forced more hydrates to be released, right? How warm did this little 5 to 8 degree temperature rise get us, right? Well, first of all, it's important to note that methane is 20 to 28 times more potent of a greenhouse gas than is carbon dioxide. So the release of this tons of methane, right, is what we think led to essentially an ice-free world. So basically, how warm was it? Well, it was warm enough that we had alligators inside the Arctic Circle up here on Ellesmere Island, right? That's 5 to 8 degrees centigrade change back off the normal, right? And we're already 0.8 degrees or more now, right? Our goal is to hopefully keep it under 2 or 3. So what implications does this have for us today, right? So today temperatures are rising as fast as during the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Today we have more methane hydrates stored in permafrost and in these deep sea deposits than existed in the PETM, in the Paleocene thermal maximum, right? They're stored in the oceans, right, as well as in the permafrost, and we're seeing lots of this being released by the permafrost, right? Take a look here. This is a video showing permafrost warming and the issues with methane.
You can't see it, but it's here. In Alaska, in Greenland, and in Siberia. Permafrost, frozen ground that's so cold, it stays frozen even during the summer.
Permafrost is any earth material under ground surface which at or below 0 degrees Celsius for 2 or more consecutive years.
Approximately 50% of the Soviet Union is on permafrost, ground that never thaws completely.
Some permafrost has been frozen solid for thousands of years, but not anymore. Because of a warming climate, permafrost is warming too, challenging the people who build on it and live on it, and accelerating global warming even more. Permafrost makes up nearly a quarter of all the land in the northern hemisphere, about 8.8 million square miles. In some places like Siberia, the ground is frozen 1,000 feet deep or more. In interior Alaska, the permafrost dates back to the last glacial cycle.
We're close to 30,000 years old here.
10 miles north of Fairbanks, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Cold Regions Research and Engineering Lab operates a tunnel where scientists can research permafrost, its geological properties, and the fossils frozen in its walls. Dr. Matthew Sturm is their chief scientist in Alaska.
The permafrost tunnel was built in the 1960s. The reasons at the time were to see how do you dig permafrost. But with time, the tunnel, I like to think of it as a phoenix. It keeps rejuvenating itself. There's other new questions we can investigate. So modern questions now have to do with climate change, changes in environmental systems. But we're also interested in how to deal with permafrost because it's still a big issue in Alaska.
Alaskans have known for years all about the shifting nature of permafrost. Large parts of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline had to be built above ground on stilts to prevent the permafrost below from thawing. And Fairbanks, Alaska's second largest city, is dotted with pockets of permafrost. The sinkholes, collapsed roads, and tipping houses are clues to places where it has warmed. But now measurements around Fairbanks show that in many places, permafrost temperatures have risen so much that it is only 1 degree below freezing. At the University of Alaska's main campus, geophysics professor Vladimir Romanovsky runs the permafrost laboratory. He uses a Russian word to describe thawing permafrost, talik.
And talik, it means not frozen in Russian, just simply not frozen. It's very important now because these taliks start to develop because of warming in climate. And the development and growing of taliks is really indication of permafrost degradation.
Romanovsky has planted 45 boreholes deep in the permafrost all over Alaska. The results show that permafrost temperatures have warmed as much as 2 degrees Celsius in the last 20 to 30 years. Normally, because of the heat emanating from the center of the Earth, permafrost should be warm at the bottom and get colder as it reaches the surface. But exactly the opposite is happening. Romanovsky's data shows that since the mid-1980s, the temperatures in permafrost have gotten warmer as they creep towards the surface.
That is an important change.
And this warming is 100% effect of changing in climate, warming in air temperature.
Thawing permafrost can take a toll on buildings and even force entire communities to relocate. But an even bigger cause for concern is the powerful greenhouse gas that gets released from thawing permafrost. Katie Walter Anthony was a young assistant professor when she made the discovery that permafrost thawing under lakes in Siberia and Alaska releases high levels of methane into the air. Methane is a greenhouse gas that's 25 times stronger than carbon dioxide.
If you look at the shore, you can see that there are lots of trees that are falling in the lake and they're dying. What's happening is the permafrost is thawing. The ice that was in the ground, when it melts, causes the ground surface to collapse. When the forest falls in and any organic matter, dead plant and animal remains that were in the permafrost, thaw out in the bottom of the lake, microbes decompose it and it
Check out
generates
how
methane.
powerful
And methane doesn't like to stay in water in solution. It forms bubbles, and those bubbles make their way to the surface.
Katie's dramatic videos of methane being released from frozen lakes have got her and methane a lot of attention.
So I've seen hundreds of lakes, thousands of lakes, and some lakes can release hundreds to thousands of times more methane than other lakes. And the most important factor is permafrost. If permafrost is around the lake and thawing beneath the lake will emit a lot of methane.
Even small releases of methane from the soil under these frozen lakes can make permafrost thaw more. That can help form more lakes that will release more methane, and so on and so on. Back in Vladimir Romanovsky's lab, his models predict permafrost warming all over Alaska in the near future.
By the end of the century, the only permafrost on the north slope and maybe in the Brooks Range will be stable. The rest of it will be pretty much thawing by the end of the century.
Scientists at the National Snow and Ice Data Center in Colorado estimate that if global warming continues at current rates, up to 2/3 of the Earth's permafrost could be gone by the year 2200, vastly increasing the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. There's little chance that all the world's permafrost will thaw at once, and an even smaller chance that deep permafrost can thaw rapidly. But just ask someone living in the far north if permafrost is warming, and they'll show you. All they have to do is look down.
All right. So, what other implications does this have today? So, it's my concern, folks, that we are approaching this threshold where we're going to be releasing a bunch of these methane hydrates, right? Remember, we're increasing temperatures now as fast as during the PETM, but we haven't even released the hydrates yet, right? If we release these methane hydrates, we will experience one of these out-of-control positive feedback mechanisms. However, there's good news. Earth has a natural recovery cycle. It'll only take about 100,000 years or so for the Earth to sequester all this carbon again, right? Long after we're gone, but, you know, anyway. All right. So, folks, now these are my thoughts on climate change, and I don't care what you think about this gentleman here. He's got some great images, just some great images. Here's my thought, folks. Climate change has become a political game, all right? Both the Democrats and the Republicans have been playing these games, and they're both to blame, right? I know this one picks on the Republicans a little bit, but it's a good idea. It's a good image or a video showing this political play.
In 90 years at Farmers, we thought we'd seen it all, from fires and hurricanes to animal anti.
I've been trying to tell this story for 30 years.
So let me show you here again what we have. So here we have whoever's talking, right? And then we have the global average temperature anomaly and our Arctic sea ice volume. And then here's the date down in the bottom, right?
And the dominant experience I've had is seeing the new evidence come in at first month by month and week by week. Now there are studies every day practically. And it just keeps getting clearer and stronger.
America's on the verge of technological breakthroughs that will enable us to live our lives less dependent on oil. And these technologies will help us be better stewards of the environment. And they will help us to confront the serious challenge of global climate change.
Now to a new report on global warming from a prestigious panel of scientists convened by the UN. The findings are blunt. Climate change is happening. It will lead to tremendous changes around the world that could have a very negative impact on the well-being of people, animals, and entire ecosystems.
The evidence is sufficient that we should move towards the most effective possible steps to reduce carbon loading of the atmosphere?
Well, I think we have to accept the view that scientists have, that there is global warming and that human operation, human condition contributes to that.
I think the risks of climate change are real, and that you're seeing climate change. I think human activity is contributing to it.
Why has it taken so long, Senator?
Special interests. It's a special interest. It's that utility companies and the petroleum companies and the other special interests, they're the ones that have blocked progress in the Congress of the United States and in the administration. That's a little straight talk.
We don't always see eye to eye, do we, Newt?
No, but we do agree our country must take action to address climate change.
I believe that climate change is real.
It's not just a greenhouse gas issue. It's a national security issue. We have an obligation to future generations to take action and fix it.
The Senate is going to do something today, beginning a debate on global warming, a comprehensive bill to deal with climate change that is favorably reported out of a Senate committee.
The yeas are 48, the nays are 36. 3/5 of the senators duly chosen and sworn not having voted in the affirmative. The motion is not agreed to.
I believe that man's activities certainly can be contributing to the issue of global warming, climate change. Here in Alaska, the only Arctic state in our union, of course, we see the effects of climate change more so than any other area.
I think most members think that the climate change is a serious issue that needs to be addressed. The question is, how do you address it? And we've never gotten into the debate and the discussion about the consequences of trying to deal with it.
We need to ultimately make clean, renewable energy the profitable kind of energy. So I ask this Congress to send me legislation that places a market-based cap on carbon pollution and drives the production of more renewable energy in America.
The sweeping climate change bill that's a top item on President Obama's agenda passed narrowly in the House of Representatives last night.
Only 8 Republicans crossed the aisle to vote with most Democrats for the bill. 44 Democrats joined most Republicans in voting against it.
Stolen emails from top researchers were posted online. Global warming skeptics saying those emails suggest that scientists may have worked together to manipulate global warming data. Defenders say those emails are being used out of context.
President Obama has said that people are justified in being disappointed by the outcome of the Copenhagen Climate Change Conference last week. In an interview on U.S. television, Mr. Obama acknowledged that nothing had been done to achieve a significant cut in greenhouse gases. But he said that the non-binding agreement reached in Denmark was better than nothing.
Top U.S. scientists urged drastic action today to slow global warming. For the first time, the National Academy of Sciences called for a specific change in climate policy. It recommended a carbon tax on fossil fuels or a cap-and-trade system for greenhouse gas emissions.
Senate Democrats pushed the climate bill off the table and into a very uncertain future ahead of November's midterm elections.
And I'll take dead aim at the cap-and-trade bill.
The Republican takeover of the House is likely to change the political climate on the issue of global warming.
And it is safe to say that the president's cap-and-trade legislation, that whole idea, is virtually dead.
House Republicans say they will scrap the Select Committee on Global Warming. Speaker-designate John Boehner called the panel, quote, a forum to promote Democrats' job-killing national energy tax, also known as cap and trade.
But when you have over 90% of the world's scientists who have studied this stating that climate change is occurring and that humans play a contributing role, it's time to defer to the experts.
Listen, when you make comments that fly in the face of what 98 out of 100 climate scientists have said, when you call into question the science of evolution, all I am saying is that in order for the Republican Party to win, we can't run from science.
The science is not settled on this. And I tell somebody, I said, just because you have a group of scientists that have stood up and said, here is the fact, Galileo got outvoted for a spell.
My view is that we don't know.
So here's the change,
what's
folks,
causing
2011-ish.
Climate change on this planet. And the idea of spending trillions and trillions of dollars to try and reduce CO2 emissions is not the right course for us.
The White House today finalized new gas mileage standards that would eventually double the fuel efficiency of new cars and trucks to an average 54.5 miles per gallon by 2025.
Obama can't get through climate change legislation, so the EPA is going to use its authority to do what it can in that regard.
President Obama promised to begin to slow the rise of the oceans. And to heal the planet. My promise is to help you and your family.
74% of U.S. Senate Republicans publicly question the science of global warming.
But this is a challenge that does not pause for partisan gridlock. It demands our attention now.
The age of the dinosaurs was dramatically warmer than this is right now, and it didn't cook the planet. And in fact, life was fine.
Are you convinced that climate change is man-made?
Well, I don't know that that is a resolved issue in science today.
You do not think that human activity, the production of CO2, has caused warming to our planet?
I do not believe that human activity is causing these dramatic changes to our climate the way these scientists are portraying it.
Do you believe in man-made climate change? Democrats, 83% say yes. Republicans, 36% say yes. It is now more divisive than abortion.
It has in recent years become ideology. It's become partisan.
The Obama administration has just rolled out a new rule to cut carbon dioxide emissions from power plants. The proposal from the Environmental Protection Agency cuts CO2 emissions by 30% by 2030. Some Democrats in coal mining states want him to hold off until after the midterm elections in November.
The world's top climate panel has issued its direst appeal to date on the need to stop global warming. In a new report, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says continued emissions of greenhouse gases will cause further warming and long-lasting changes in all components of the climate system, increasing the likelihood of severe, pervasive, and irreversible impacts.
Scientists report that 2014 was the hottest year in recorded history for the planet, and that dates back to 1880.
Satellite data demonstrate for the last 17 years there's been zero warming, none whatsoever.
That actually, folks, is complete bullshit because I've already shown you the satellite data.
We're seeing these horrible the reports are now in Palmyra. They're executing people and leaving their bodies in the streets. Meanwhile, the President of the United States is saying that the biggest enemy we have is climate change.
We've had one record-setting year after another as far as the heat on this planet. So
I don't buy that, Joe.
What do you mean you don't buy it?
I just don't buy the fact. I don't buy the fact that it's a crisis. I don't buy the fact that it's a crisis. I just don't.
I think that there'll be little change here. It'll go up. It'll get a little cooler. It'll get a little warmer, like it always has for millions of years. It'll get cooler. It'll get warmer. It's called weather. I think it's a big scam for a lot of people to make a lot of money.
In my first inaugural address, I committed this country to the tireless task of combating climate change and protecting this planet for future generations. 2 weeks ago in Paris, I said before the world that we needed a strong global agreement to accomplish this goal. An enduring agreement that reduces global carbon pollution and sets the world on a course to a low-carbon future. A few hours ago, we succeeded.
The question now, is this agreement just paper, or will it lead to crucial steps needed to make it something truly historic?
Feeling the heat? So is planet Earth. Federal scientists announced today that 2015 was the warmest year on record, with land and ocean temperatures nearly 2 degrees above average.
A major setback tonight for President Obama's climate change initiative.
The U.S. Supreme Court stepped in to put the centerpiece of President Obama's climate change agenda on hold, pending the outcome of judicial appeals in the lower courts.
Starting in November, December, January, all the way through April,
Each of those months have been the hottest in history.
Last month was the hottest May ever recorded, the 13th straight month to set a new record.
Trump's statement comes just a couple days after he released his first energy plan. He says he would, quote, cancel the Paris climate deal and promote more fossil fuels in the United States.
It was the hottest June since record-keeping began back in 1895.
Researchers say July 2016 was the hottest month in recorded history.
All right, folks, hopefully that shows you a little bit about how both parties are playing games with the climate change issue, right? This one here is just for fun, but I love it, so I'll play it for you.
The Earth. You may know it as that blue thing Bruce Willis is always trying to save. Or from its famous collaboration with wind and fire. Or just simply as that place where George Clooney lives. Anyway, the Earth had some genuinely bad news this week.
A White House report that says global warming threatens every part of the U.S.
This isn't something in the distant future. Climate change is already affecting us now.
Now. Smart move, Obama. That is a key shift in how to talk about climate change, because we've all proven that we cannot be trusted with the future tense. We've been repeatedly asked, don't you want to leave a better Earth for your grandchildren? And we've all collectively responded, fuck 'em. But, incredibly, this latest damning scientific report may still face an uphill climb with some of us.
There's that Gallup poll that came out last month, which found 1 in 4 Americans is skeptical of all the effects of climate change and thinks this issue's been exaggerated.
Who gives a shit? That doesn't matter. You don't need people's opinions on a fact. You might as well have a poll asking which number is bigger, 15 or 5? Or do owls exist? Or are there hats? The debate on climate change should not be whether or not it exists, it's what we should do about it. There is a mountain of research on this topic. Global temperatures are rising, heat waves are becoming more common, sea surface temperatures are also rising, glaciers are melting, and of course no climate report is complete without the obligatory photo of a polar bear balancing on a piece of ice. The only accurate way to report that 1 out of 4 Americans are sceptical of global warming is to say, a poll finds that 1 out of 4 Americans are wrong about something. Because a survey of thousands of scientific papers that took a position on climate change found that 97% endorsed the position that humans are causing global warming.
Folks, not that it is occurring, that was 100%, right? But that it is human-induced.
And I think I know why people still think this issue is open to debate, because on TV, it is. And it's always 1 person for, 1 person against. And it's usually the same person for.
Bill Nye and Marsha Blackburn, welcome both of you to Meet the Press.
Bill Nye joins us now, along with climate change skeptic Mark Morano.
Joining me now to go head-to-head, Bill Nye, science educator and CEO of the Planetary Society.
In the crossfire, Bill Nye, the science guy.
Bill Nye, the science guy who believes in man-made global warming.
Yeah, that's right. More often than not, it's Bill Nye, the science guy, versus some dude. And when you look at the screen, it's 50-50, which is inherently misleading. If there has to be a debate about the reality of climate change, and there doesn't, then there is only one mathematically fair way to do it.
Last Week Tonight presents a statistically representative climate change debate.
Good evening. Joining me tonight, a climate change denier and, naturally, Bill Nye Science Guy.
John?
Yep.
Humans are causing climate change? No question.
Wait. Before we begin, in the interest of mathematical balance, I'm going to bring out 2 people who agree with you, climate skeptic, and Bill Nye, I'm also going to bring out 96 other scientists. It's a little unwieldy, but this is the only way you can actually have a representative discussion. So, yeah, please file in. Again, this is going to make the debate difficult. We shouldn't really be having it in the first place. But, representationally, climate skeptic, please make a case against climate change.
Well, I just don't think all the science is in yet. It's settled.
Okay, and what is the overwhelming view of the entire scientific community?
Well,
was fun, right? So, yeah, that really is how it is. You know, most of the scientific community agrees that climate change is human-induced, right? Not that it exists. Of course it exists. That's just data, right? So, continuing my thoughts on global climate change, folks. Is climate change happening? Well, yeah, we can directly measure this. It's just data, right? Are humans responsible for at least part of this? Well, are carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and methane greenhouse gases? Yes, that's data, right? Does burning fossil fuels release these? Yes, that's data, right? Therefore, it is impossible that we aren't at least adding to climate change. So, here's the issue, in my opinion, folks. We're a selfish species, right? This whole idea of save the world, it's a really vague concept, right? I mean, save the planet, right? Big, vague concept. Here's the issue. We've looked at the history of our planet. We've looked at the 5 major mass extinctions that have come before, right? One of them took out up to 96% of all life on Earth. Here's the issue, folks. It's not save the world, right? The world will be just fine. Thank you very much, right? The issue is we need to save ourselves, right? Until we change the conversation, nothing is going to happen, right? Until we make this switch in how we talk about things, nothing's going to change. What is the switch that we need to make, right? It's not about saving the planet, folks. It's really about saving ourselves, right? And until we get that through our heads, nothing is going to change, right? So, like I said earlier, I'm not very optimistic about our future as a species, folks. But I would like to conclude the class with this video.
Dear future generations, I think I speak for the rest of us when I say, sorry. Sorry we left you with our mess of a planet. Sorry that we were too caught up in our own doings to do something. Sorry we listened to people who made excuses to do nothing. I hope you forgive us. We just didn't realize how special the earth was. Like a marriage gone wrong, we didn't know what we had until it was gone. For example, I'm guessing you probably know it as the Amazon desert, right? Well, believe it or not, it was once called the Amazon rainforest, and there were billions of trees there, all of them gorgeous, and... Oh, you don't know much about trees, do you? Well, let me tell you, trees are amazing. I mean, we literally breathe the air they are creating. They clean up our pollution, our carbon. They store and purify water, give us medicine that cures our diseases, food that feeds us, which is why I'm so sorry to tell you that we burn them down. Cut them down with brutal machines, horrific, at a rate of 40 football fields every minute. That's 50% of all the trees in the world gone in the last 100 years. Why? For this. And that wouldn't make me so sad if it weren't so many pictures of leaves on it. You know, when I was a child, I read how the Native Americans had such consideration for the planet that they felt responsible for how they left the land for the next 7 generations. Which brings me great sorrow, because most of us today don't even care about tomorrow. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry that we put profit above people, greed above need, the rule of gold above the golden rule. I'm sorry we use nature as a credit card with no spending limit, overdrafting animals to extinction, stealing your chance to ever see their uniqueness or become friends with them. Sorry we poison the ocean so much that you can't even swim in them. But most of all, I'm sorry about our mindset, 'cause we had the nerve to call this destruction progress. Hey, Fox News, if you don't think climate change is a threat, I dare you to interview the thousands of homeless people in Bangladesh. See, while you were in your penthouse nestled, their homes were literally washed away beneath their feet due to rising sea levels. And Sarah Palin, you said that you love the smell of fossil fuels. Well, I urge you to talk to the kids of Beijing who are forced to wear pollution masks just to go to school. See, you can ignore this, but the thing about truth is, it can be denied, not avoided. So I'm sorry, future generations. I'm sorry that our footprint became a sinkhole and not a garden. I'm sorry that we paid so much attention to ISIS and very little to how fast the ice is melting in the Arctic. I'm sorry we doomed you, and I'm sorry we couldn't find another planet in time to move to. You know what? Cut the beat. I'm not sorry. This future, I do not accept it. Because an error does not become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We can redirect this. How? Let me suggest that if a farmer sees a tree that is unhealthy, they don't look at the branches to diagnose it, they look at the root. So like that farmer, we must look at the root and not to the branches of government, not to the politicians run by corporations. We are the root, we are the foundation, this generation. It is up to us to take care of this planet. It is our only home. We must globally warm our hearts and change the climate of our souls and realize that we are not apart from nature, we are a part of nature. And to betray nature is to betray us. To save nature is to save us. Because whatever you're fighting for, racism or poverty, feminism, gay rights, or any type of equality, it won't matter in the least. Because if we don't all work together to save the environment, we will be equally extinct. Sorry.